insights for every one of us here through IES Perspectives at Indonesia Economic Summit 2026. And once again, we'd like to thank you, Bapak Pandu Syahrir, Chief Investment Officer of Danantara Indonesia, for joining us here at IES 2026. Once again, we thank you for your presence and your support for this summit. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned by Bapak Pandu, we have an exciting lineup of speakers and of course our compelling moderator in just a moment, because this will be our final plenary discussion here at IES 2026. Our final and closing session is titled Principled or Pragmatic: How States Are Managing Global Risks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as global fragmentation becomes the new permanent condition, emerging economies face the ultimate balancing act, preserving strategic autonomy while mitigating geopolitical shocks. And to moderate this dialogue, it is my distinct honor to welcome onto the stage the Dean and Managing Director of the Area School of Government, Mr. Nobuhiro Aizawa. Please give a round of applause.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our last session, and thank you very much for staying till the end. Indeed, this is a very exciting and challenging moment to talk about the geopolitics and all the risks that we are facing and challenging. And this is the wonderful session for us to bring our distinguished speakers to pick their brains to how to navigate these challenging times. And I will, to go straight, I would like to invite all our distinguished speakers to our podium, and then we would like to hear from them in the coming hour or so. So first, I would like to invite Ambassador Chee from Singapore. Please welcome her with applause. And also the Professor Peter Drysdale to the podium. And also Mr. Victor Gao to the podium, please. Then, of course, Ambassador Takio Yamada to the podium, please. Yes, so together with our distinguished panelists, of course, we want to address the analyze the challenges, but also try to carve out some promises that we could think together. So first of all, we would like to ask everyone for their assessment on the current dynamics and the possible solutions and ideas to come to the future, to put forward together. So I would like to ask one by one, and then starting from Ambassador Chan for your first thoughts. And yes, please, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Nobu, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for staying for the last session to hear us speak. How do I see the world? I think without a doubt, we are seeing a paradigm shift taking place. In Davos, they spoke about rupture, and the Europeans are finally getting it. And Ursula von der Leyen said we shouldn't be nostalgic about the past. So things are changing. Now, in 2025, I would say, gray swans turned into black swans. When we saw Trump 2.0 happening, I think all the countries in the world expected tariffs to go up. But what happened on Liberation Day was so steep, so wide, and so swift that every country reeled from shock. Now, those tariffs have been walked back, but the air of uncertainty and unpredictability is around. And I think you will find that then I would say on January 3rd, 2026, we saw another shock. And the shock happened because of Venezuela and what was discussed about Greenland. Middle-sized countries don't like what they see, and they're trying to push back, the Europeans. So you imagine, for small states, and a small state like Singapore, this is really quite dismaying. What we see is that the world is turning to accept the principle or enforcing a principle of might is right. And if that becomes contagious behavior for bigger states, is a very dangerous place for us all. Now, fortunately, I would say there is a bright spark. I see many countries reacting with a sense of agency. They want to do something about it, and they feel they can do something about it. So what are they doing? I will name 3 things. First, nation-states are making friends with other nation-states, states that they never even connected with. You find, we are looking for new markets. We are looking for new friends because what the architect of the old system has unraveled the system, and we are left to look for other things. I know Indonesia has signed a lot of new trade agreements. I was very surprised when Indonesia signed the East Asia European Union deal, and you were connecting with countries like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, Russia. I think you had a free trade deal done. And that's what I mean by looking for new friends and creation of new networks. That is what countries are doing to protect themselves. And Singapore, what did Singapore do? We signed with Mercosur. Everyone is signing, by the way, with UAE. And Malaysia did a very good thing as the ASEAN chair because Malaysia brought China, the Gulf states, ASEAN together. So it's really new combinations, new networks. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that I see happening to deal with this uncertainty and unpredictability is that countries that are like-minded are coming together to create a space where the rule of law, WTO rules are still preserved. They do not believe that we should tear up WTO. We want WTO. We still want the rules of the UN. So what is happening? CPTPP is there, RCEP is there, and Singapore recently, together with New Zealand, Singapore, UAE, and Switzerland, 4 small countries with serious countries, I like to say, with some not bad on resources, came together. And we are forming a trade corridor, not a trade agreement, a trade corridor where we say between New Zealand all the way to Chile, touching Rwanda, Morocco, Iceland, Norway, UAE, so a lot of countries. There are 16 now, and it's open. Anyone can join. But in that corridor, we agree we will follow rules. We will follow the rule of law. We will preserve the space to trade, to invest, and keep supply chains open. So countries are creating space. They are creating new geometries, CPTPP and EU to combine. Is it possible that we come together? And is it possible for RCEP and CPTPP to have some loose association? So new geometries are being thought up of. But this is fragmented. And in a way, it is not against the United States. We are waiting for the United States to come to their senses and say, we want free trade again. You know, we are open. But if you don't want to play, we will play. So there's fragmentation, but new spaces are being opened. And the last point I want to make is that what is interesting, you know, for us all in Asia, in Southeast Asia, the US-China relationship is the most important relationship affecting our prosperity and our security. I think there is a pause in the US-China tension and rivalry. Whatever you say about President Trump, he stabilized the relationship. The United States, for the time being, I don't know how long this will last, but the United States and China, both leaders have decided they will take a pause. No one wants to go to war. But there are issues that still have to be sorted out. But I think that is a good thing for all of us. And it is interesting because when the two great powers take a pause, middle powers can feel the freedom to act. And we have seen this. Britain, everybody is now going to China. You know, of course, there are reasons also, because the US market and the US, they've sort of changed the rules. So there are new relationships sought. But I think the space was opened up for new relationships. So I asked myself, dare I think that if this carries on for a few years, maybe we've all pulled back from the brink where the US-China relationship was going over the cliff. We all pull back. Can we come to a situation of coexistence, which is managed competition? You know that you really won't embrace each other, but you manage the competition. So I feel a bit, maybe I'm optimistic. I hope that will happen, this managed competition, that this pause is allowing that. The last point I want to make, which is really the fourth, is that everyone is now talking of the end of American hegemonism. By hegemonism, you mean this overwhelming power that decides the architecture, which has military power, economic power, political power, etc., and whose values is taken to be the values of the entire global system. That moment for the United States is over. It happened after the Cold War. The US was unipolar. It is not so now. But I would add that although you can say Pax Americana is over, it is not yet a post-America world. People who say it is a post-America world are too hasty, and they are wrong. Why do I say that? Because one, every country is negotiating to go into the hypermarket of America. We are falling all over ourselves, you know, to want to go back to the American market. That is one. US currency, the US dollar is still the reserve currency. Reserve currency is the currency you want to store your country's wealth. What will you store in? Some gold? Crypto? No. You know, so I think you can diversify, but it will be the US dollar. Some yen, some euro, US dollar. And finally, the third point where I will emphasize, which shows, frankly, it is not yet a post-America world, besides their military power, which is not disputed right now. It is the fact that if you look at the world's top 50 companies in the world, 34 are American companies, largest companies. Forbes has a list, top 10. you take 4 metrics: sales, profits, assets, market value. Out of the 10, 6 are American. So I would say it's not yet a post-American world. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chen. I really like the way we're not overexcited about the transformation and the change, but we have to remain very cautious, and we have to make sure that we don't speed up too much. And I like the optimism, cautious optimism for the next, the new business as usual. I would like to invite Victor Gao for your take on how the dynamics and how the current situation is look from your eyes and your perspective. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is my great honor and privilege to be back in Jakarta and experience the great dynamism demonstrated by Indonesia. For me, Indonesia is one of the most important countries in the world of today. Why? Because it is the largest Muslim country in the world. And the president of Indonesia is very much dedicated to developing the economy very rapidly, aiming to achieve 8% GDP growth, which upon being delivered will be one of the most aggressive GDP growth rates in the world of today. China used to achieve 8% or even 10% GDP growth for many years before. So we have the experience of achieving 8% GDP growth, and I want to see Indonesia achieve 8% GDP growth so that you can uplift the country and improve the living standards of almost up to about 300 million people here in Indonesia. Now, being the last panel doesn't mean that our panel is not the least important, because we are talking about the world situation as a whole. So allow me to have the luxury of looking at the world, not only today, but maybe 50 years from now or 100 years from now. Allow me to make one observation. I think historians in the future will look back upon this year, 2026, and mark it as the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that Pax Americana is really, the curtain is coming down. No, it's not. But the beginning of the end is with us, and all of us are experiencing that. Whatever headline news you read and you watch will mean that the beginning of the end of Pax Americana is with us. Now, you may say, as the ambassador said, well, the United States is the hegemon. It's still very powerful. Economically speaking, it's still the largest economy in the world. Yes, there is no denying about that. But whatever the Trump administration is doing now, threatening war against one country after another, tearing the United States into pieces, ICE running around in the society in the United States, all these things are completely against what I learned from Yale Law School, where I got my JD degree. It's completely opposite from what I studied, law in the United States. So I want to share with you my observation. Whatever the US government is doing today is accelerating the final end of Pax Americana. So I think in a world in great flux, all of us need to use our brain and sanity and judgment to decide what is the wrong thing and what is the right thing. Because this is the moment you cannot afford to make a mistake. And the United States for decades have forced many countries in the world to pick and choose between China versus the United States. I said for many years, that's the wrong choice. Don't be forced to pick and choose between China and the United States. That's the wrong choice. What is the right choice? The right choice is for you to use your brain and decide whether the United States is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and whether China is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. If the United States is doing the wrong thing, do you really want to follow its leadership? If President Trump wants to take over Greenland, you really want to support the United States? If China's doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with China? For example, China's pushing the edge of the envelope for developing electronic vehicle. In my judgment, it will be the mega trend all of us will live through. All countries, especially automaking countries, need to make that leap of faith to embrace electric vehicle rather than holding on to whatever that remains of the fuel cars. That's one of the many examples. Now, on the other hand, I think countries like Indonesia, being a very important country, a leading country, and one of the most important Muslim countries in the world, also need to figure out, in addition to whatever it needs to do to grow its economy, whether it wants to defend free trade. And we cannot allow free trade to be destroyed, because once you lose free trade doesn't mean you don't need to pay. Free trade means it's up to party A and party B to decide whether they want to buy something or sell something. And the government should not intervene. A government, whether it is the US government or otherwise, should not stand in the way and say, no, I want to weaponize tariff. That's the wrong thing to do. And also, allow me to share with you one open secret. Do you know, for the hundreds of millions of dollars the US government is charging, who is paying all these tariffs? Does China pay? No, China is not paying a single penny. Does Japan pay? I hope not. Does Australia pay? I hope not. All the tariffs, up to about 100% of the tariffs the US government is charging, is paid by the American people. It's kind of a tax on the American people. So how can any government claim with the sanity of the mind that by charging hundreds of millions of dollars of tariffs, they can make America great again? No. The United States, by weaponizing tariff, is holding a gun at your head, demanding your surrender, issuing ultimatum, one after another. That is the wrong thing, I would say. So I think we need to know the right thing and the wrong thing. Defend free trade is the right thing, promoting market practice. And for countries like China and Indonesia, I hope we will achieve our prosperity through hard work. In China, we worked very hard. I personally probably never had a weekend. All my holidays and vacations are spent on working. So I hope people in Indonesia will do similar things. We keep working, we keep building up a wealth rather than plundering wealth from other countries or try to really cast a coveting eye onto your land, onto your wealth, onto your wives, for example. No, that is a free fall from the top of the mountain into the abyss of the law of the jungle. So I am so happy 8 billion people in the world today have the luxury of watching history being made in front of us and giving us an opportunity to decide what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing. And for countries like Indonesia and all the 11 ASEAN member states, for each of us, each of the ASEAN member states, we need to figure out what is the wrong thing being done in the world of today. Are you really joining the wrong thing being done, even though it is done by the hegemon in the world? I think I'm very much deeply impressed by what Prime Minister Carney of Canada said in Davos. I think his speech will be marked as one of the most important speeches in human history. Read that again and again and again and try to understand what Prime Minister Carney really meant. Why Prime Minister Carney was welcomed as a hero in China after 8 years of absence by a Canadian Prime Minister. Why Prime Minister Starmer of Britain was given red carpet treatment and spending 4 days in China after 8 years of absence from China by a Prime Minister of Great Britain. Why I'm thinking about initiating a process to make sure that His Majesty the King will be able to visit China after being away from Hong Kong for about 30 years. So you can see things are changing in the world. And given the shortness of time, I will stop here and I'll be very happy to join the panel in answering whatever questions you make. So long as we work together to defend free trade, let me tell you, no country will be able to destroy free trade. We want to enjoy free trade as it is, and we should never allow any single country or any groups of countries to destroy free trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Victor. So I would like to pass the microphone to Professor Drysdale.
Thanks, Nobu. Well, I think we're all agreed that the Carney speech was a turning point in world acknowledgement that the old order is broken, the rules-based order is broken. That's a clear signal to the rest of us that something needs to be done. What Carney wasn't so clear on was what it is that comes next. That's a work in progress, and Carney is actively traveling around the world now. He'll be in Australia in a few weeks' time to talk through those issues. When we look at what's next to be done, there are some ideas that the panel's already suggested. First of all, I think there's a unity ticket that Pax America is on the wane, if not in its last days, as Victor suggested. What comes next out of Pax America is another question altogether. I think there are just three things that I want to say about this. The first thing is, and I think it's a very important thing, is that whilst the world is broken, ruptured in Carney's terms, the old world order, what's clear is the institutions that sustain the rules-based order are still there. They're still in place, and they're still operational. The United Nations is still there. The WTO is still there. The World Bank is still there. The IMF is still there. And they're still operational. And whilst Mr. Trump might dearly wish to destroy them, first, he hasn't done that, and secondly, I'd suggest that he's not likely to be able to do it, since the cost of doing that for the United States itself and the pushback from that in the United States itself, let alone elsewhere, would prevent him from so doing. So that's a starting point, and it's a very important observation because it means that when we decide whether China's doing right or wrong, or the United States is doing right or wrong, we have a set of institutions and a set of principles embodied in those institutions which will allow us to confidently make judgments about whether China or the United States is doing right or wrong as the two largest superpowers in the world. And appeal to those institutions there becomes very important. So when we look at those principles, the key ones, of course, being sovereignty and equal treatment among nations in respect of trade and openness to trade, as Victor emphasized, these things have a basis in our institutional framework still to which we can appeal. So that's the first point I'd make. The world is broken in its own, in its old terms, but it's still, the institutions, the furniture's still in place. The second point I want to say, and this is really the heart of Carney's point, is that beyond the superpowers, there are a lot of middle and smaller powers that matter. They constitute 80% of the global economy, for example, almost 80% of the global economy. And they have more at stake in the old rules that embedded in the old institutions than any other countries. They have more to lose by the dominance of brute force in the determination of global economic and political outcomes than any other countries. They'll be the ones most disadvantaged from it. So there is a third way. The third way, of course, is the incentive that middle powers and smaller powers have to cooperate, as Heng Chee said, more intensively to protect those interests in the global system. And that's the challenge for us now. The world wouldn't sensibly follow the United States into an anarchic, chaotic world. And it wouldn't follow automatically China into a Sino-centric world until it develops trust in China based on those principles. Though it could and would and clearly is, by its actions now, seeking to accommodate China consistently with China's commitment to its multilateral rhetoric and its shared common community values and principles, are growing a more important and growing role in the global system. So the third point I want to make is simply this, that going forward, the pragmatic way is not to try to reimagine the world order completely, because we have the legacy of the established order, rules-based order, to work with. The idea, sensibly, is to defend those institutions and build around them and upon them to preserve the principles and the institutions that protect us against a world of brute force. That's the first set of ideas that we need to comprehend clearly. But you ask, where do we go from here? And this is the big step. Well, the best place to start always is in your own backyard. And the conversations over the last 2 days have reinforced the point that the response to the uncertainties in the global economy, and uncertainties there will remain in the global economy whilst we have President Trump, and it'll take a long time for the United States to stabilize in that respect and for us to build up trust in a stable and responsible United States in that respect. Those uncertainties remain. So the important thing is to reduce those uncertainties where we can. In our own economies, it means intensive focus on deregulation and make our economies more efficient and open to those with whom we wish to engage. And it means building around our economies integration where we can, deeper integration where we can with our partners, particularly in our region because this openness has been so important to our prosperity and our economic security. So here in Asia, our own backyard, we can build deeper integration, not retreat from integration. We can liberalize and deregulate our economies more effectively and intensively, not retreat from liberalization and deregulation. And we can, through that process, engage with other parts of the world, as Cheng said, Europe and elsewhere in the world, to build the coalition that's necessary to defend the open system that is so important to our economic security and prosperity.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of principles that you have laid out will lead to the next questions because, who's holding that principles, whether it's the global institutions or whether country by country or by regions. I think that's going to be a big question, to find a solution onto. I would like to invite Ambassador Yamada for your thoughts about the current dynamics in of the world that you see.
Well, thank you very much, and I agree with all other panelists on the point that we are now standing at the historic turning point, and we have witnessed a sort of a collapse of the regime which supported the world after the Second World War, and it's a dramatic one, and so many things happened for the past year. And so what we should do from now on, and it may be a time that world peace or regime, which is supported by only one single dominant power, maybe coming to an end. And well, that means the role of middle powers like Indonesia and Japan are getting more and more important for the coming age. And that's why I welcome this initiative by Indonesia Business Council, very timely and very substantial. And Japan had played a role of hub, of networking of middle powers actually, for some time. This was clearly described in the book published by a researcher of Brookings Institute called Dr. Minia Solis, titled Japan's Quiet Leadership. We have actually led the process of CPTPP, and we are a member of RCEP. And we have also organized a lot of minilaterals in the region. And also, I'm now actually ambassador in charge of AZEC, Asia Zero Emission Community Initiative. That is launched by Prime Minister Kishida and succeeded by Prime Minister Takaichi. And this is actually, we're having a robust support from the leadership from Japan. And we'll continue to do it in a more vocal way, because we need to raise our voice from now on. As this is a time that network of middle powers like Indonesia and Japan is getting crucial and critical to address the challenges we are facing. And we welcome the very positive diplomacy conducted by Indonesia. And we welcome your accession to BRICS, for example, last year, January last year. And we welcome that you'll play wider role. Similarly, we welcome the ASEAN agency. This is a time that ASEAN would further promote their integration and coordination. Because now this is a time that ASEAN should stand up, because ASEAN's GDP is more than 4 trillion US dollars. And actually, that is slightly bigger than Japan's GDP. I used to be an ambassador to ASEAN stationed here more than 10 years ago. But I couldn't imagine that such a time will come so quickly. But this is a time, and that's why Japan put emphasis on the increased importance of the partnership with ASEAN. And now, let's discuss about what we should do in more concrete terms together. Because the networking is not just a catchphrase or concept, but we have to deliver things on the ground. And that's why I think that AZEC is very important. We have already signed more than 500 MOUs under the AZEC, mainly between Japan and ASEAN nations. And we are ready to further promote. And also, Mari Pangestu, Madame Mari said that, ASEAN and East Asia should rather be rule shaper than rule taker. And AZEC is a concept which actually tries to accommodate the ground conditions of East Asia, ASEAN, and Japan. Yes, of course, it's very important to reduce the emission of GHG, but at the same time, ASEAN needs to grow further, and ASEAN's energy security should be maintained. And that's why we are promoting the multiple pathway approach. And in the transition measure, we believe that gas continues to be important for a while. And so we are promoting the traditional finance for promoting the gas investment and financing those projects. And also, I'd like to just raise our views about the agenda in the Pacific. This is actually a 10th anniversary of the proposal by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of the free and open Indo-Pacific concept that was made in 2016. And Madam Takaichi is committed to promote and update the concept of FOIP to meet with the emergent challenges and new conditions. We need to update that. So not only promoting the free trade, rule-based trade, but also we need to be prepared for a lot of new challenges and risks. And so de-risking or, economic security is getting more and more important for the FOIP. But the network of the Indo-Pacific nations, network of the middle powers in the region will be actually very much useful and relevant to promote the cooperation for enhancing the resilience of supply chain and for promoting the innovation and for enhancing the preparedness for the challenges that new innovation may give to us. And so, taking advantage of the 10th anniversary, the government of Japan is also ready to take robust lead in updating the concept of FOIP using all the opportunities for this year towards the end of this year. And once again, I'd like to stress that we are entering into a new age where the role of middle powers and networks of the middle powers are getting more and more important. That's why our partnership between Japan and Indonesia, Japan and ASEAN is getting to be critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we echo those very important initiatives to strengthen our region together. But before we close our side of remarks, I have one topic that I would like to pose everyone, since we haven't talked about Indonesia here, right? So we are now here and convening in Indonesia because we expect a lot from Indonesia. And I think as you characterizes the changing dynamics in the current state of the world, I would want to ask each of you, in your perspective, what Indonesia should do more in the agenda you have laid out, because I'm sure Indonesia has this principle of bebas active and its role, and I think it is the time that it's not the business as usual, and I think among the middle power countries that you have portrayed, I think in each country has its different position in those middle power categories too. And I think there is a particular position that Indonesia can play. And for all of you, for our four colleagues here, I really like to pinpoint on your characteristic of the global dynamic right now, what Indonesia needs to do and what Indonesia needs to do more, particularly. So can I ask you from Peter?
Yeah, well, look, Indonesia's done pretty well in this game. In response to the shock of last year, mobilized itself strategically and negotiated a reciprocal agreement. It's still in process and still in settlement, a reciprocal agreement with the United States that pushed back against the asks from the United States, which were unreasonable from the viewpoint of Indonesia's interests in the region and in the world. And together with its ASEAN partners, it instigated this ASEAN Geoeconomics Task Force, which was taken through to the ASEAN process, to the chair level last year, and beyond the ASEAN process into the RCEP process, with the leaders meeting, doubling down in the region on the liberalization and deregulation agenda, which is important for Indonesia, and scaling up Indonesia through ASEAN, the region. Of course, it's still a long way to go, and there are a lot of challenges in Indonesia. Indonesia's also made progress over the years since the Asian financial crisis in building up the stability of its financial system, and husbanding and guarding that carefully will be a very important challenge for Indonesia going forward. And that alongside the opening up of the Indonesian economy to the rest of the region, really effectively scaling up ASEAN and integration with ASEAN and connecting between ASEAN and the rest of its partners in the region, China, Japan, Korea, and globally. So they're the challenges for Indonesia, I think. But so far, the record is not a bad record, but it's a challenging time ahead. Indonesia is well positioned globally to take a role with ASEAN in leadership in the development of a defense of its interests through the global system and through the global institutions. Now, whether it can mobilize the capacities within itself and its partners to do that remains a question, but that's the strategic challenge for Indonesia now, because it's so important, as Victor said, as a balancing force through ASEAN and in its own right in the entire East Asian region.
Wonderful. That is a very assuring, remarks and expectations to Indonesia, right? Let me ask Victor too. How do you see Indonesia? You mentioned about all should see whether U.S. is doing good or bad, China is doing good or bad. But how about if you look at Indonesia doing good or bad? What will be your criteria? What will be your characteristic to say whether Indonesia is doing good or bad?
Thank you very much. I'm a great admirer of Indonesia and for its great achievements over the past several decades. Now, my advice, if any, for Indonesia includes the following. First, be a friend with all, be a foe with none. That means you want to be peaceful with all the countries in the world, big or small, your neighborhood, beyond your horizon, etc. And I was very much encouraged to see the cooperation between Indonesia and the Islamic world or the Arab world, etc. That's very important. And also with big countries around you, China, Japan, Australia, India, you name it. All these countries are important, and try to engage with each of them, all of them, as friends. And don't, fall into the trap of becoming alienated or estranged with any of these countries. That means keeping peace is very important. Secondly, maintain domestic stability will be crucially important. We know many countries actually fall into the pit because of the foreign orchestrated color revolution, regime change, etc. So eventually the people in those countries suffer the consequences. The third thing is always focus on development. Development, development, development. Deng Xiaoping, for whom I had the great honor of interpreting for more than 20 important meetings, always said, development is the hard truth. And I hope this applies to the Chinese people, as you can see, and it will also apply to the Indonesian people. Always develop and never think about plundering the wealth of other countries or plundering the land or the asset of other countries. Now, the fourth point, very briefly, I hope Indonesia is on the verge of doing something greater, meaning you want to promote modernization of agriculture, industry, yes, of course, but you also want to leapfrog to the forefront because the world is changing right now by this tsunami of AI revolution. AI will change everything we do. So if you do not hurry up to really finding out or identifying an important role for Indonesia to play in this AI revolution, eventually you will be left behind. I coined the term called AI divide. I hope Indonesia will not be on the wrong side of the AI divide, and Indonesia will figure out a very positive role to play in this AI revolution. Now, the final point is my hope that Indonesia will rise up to the occasion and defend the free trade, defend the market economy, and also promote modernity for a great country like Indonesia with hundreds of millions of Muslims, and be a champion of modernization and modernity in the Islamic world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And also, I would like to ask Ambassador Chan. You mentioned about like new geometries and. Sorry. You mentioned about the new geometries. I'm sure Indonesian, diplomatic history has a lot of initiative, like during the Sukarno period, creating a type of a new geometries. What is this time that Indonesia has to play its role? Is this time different? Is there a new heights that Indonesia should achieve? How do you see?
First of all, I want to say that I agree with what has been said by my colleagues so far on the panel. Peter is an economist of Indonesia, and he really knows Indonesia. So there's not much I can add. And Victor has referred to the building domestic strength. Most countries now believe that you have to build domestic strength before, as well as take external action. Now, you asked about what action should Indonesia do to help build geometry. Indonesia has been doing, in fact, a lot of the right things even before Trump came into power. I think we were anticipating in this region that President Trump would come into power and protectionism would be a bit on the rise. So let us form new trade agreements elsewhere. And I know Indonesia has been very active, even before 2025, signing up a lot of trade agreements, negotiating, and inquiring whether Europe would want to do trade agreements and so on. So that's the right path. But I think what Indonesia can really do, which is very important, and I say it as a member of ASEAN, is that you can really help to bring ASEAN together. In this world, ASEAN really needs to come together. We keep talking about it yesterday, today, but how? We keep saying that we really have to integrate and be united, but we can't seem to come to the agreements. So we really need leadership. And I think if Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia work together to try to create this unity, and Indonesia has to be in that game, really, and you have to play a very important role there. You can help us push forward. We must dare to do something. We can't keep to the same old way of doing things. So how can we, in fact, come together? Now, people have talked about the power grid, fintech. Victor mentioned AI. In fact, Indonesia had a very attractive, very good startup scene. I am amazed at how your startups become so big, and you have unicorns in this country. And because Indonesia is so far-flung and spread, it really works with AI. You connect with each other. You have the markets. And I think maybe you can offer this kind of leadership. How do we do startups with Indonesia? And Indonesia can talk to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam. Can we work together and bring ASEAN forth? And I think if you can do that, give the kind of leadership to ASEAN, that would be most welcome. Thank you.
So Ambassador Yamada, I think you have the final very difficult position that you have to raise, which is, I think all three colleagues are right. You have to hold the global institution, you have to have a very strong domestic economy, and you have to have an ASEAN cooperation. But how do you all do all of those, right? Sometimes if you want to build up your domestic, you have to sacrifice a little bit of international cooperation. So how is your take? You mentioned about the regional configuration. If you're put in your shoes in Indonesia, how do you see it differently, and what are the heights that Indonesia should aim for in this trilemma situation?
Okay, thank you. As I said that, I believe that we are now entering into an age of middle powers. We cannot rely upon any single predominant power anymore. That's actually the fact. That's why I believe that the role of Indonesia is getting more and more important, very critical. And Indonesia has the diplomatic skills and experiences leading the process of non-alignment and organizing a Bandung conference. Actually, I attended the 50th anniversary of Bandung conference in Jakarta as the director in charge of ASEAN cooperation. And after 67, you have led the ASEAN process. And without the role of Indonesia, today ASEAN has not been achieved, I am convinced. And now you have a new mission to lead the coordination and the cooperation and networking of world middle powers. Of course, you will continue to be a leader of ASEAN. That's very important. ASEAN unity is very important. But not only for ASEAN, you have a wider roles, extending to BRICS is, of course, one of the frameworks. That partnership for Indonesia with Japan, Europe, and so on, is also getting more and more important. And I'd like to stress that now actually the most scarce resource of the world is trust. But Indonesia is a trustworthy partner. We have a hati-ku-hati partnership, or a tuman-hati, yeah. And we can trust you, and please trust Japan. And under today's circumstances, trust and predictability is the most important asset, most valuable asset for everybody. That's why orang Japan, kami suka Indonesia dengan banyak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the last concept you raised, trust, is particularly important in the digital age, right? Whether you understand this, whether you trust this data, whether you trust the AI result, I mean, the trust is not even more important. I need to apologize. The time is up for our stage to further discuss, as we are blessed with the depth and the width of our experts' insights. But at the last point, I really wanted to commend the IBC for convening this Indonesian Economic Summit, because I think this is what we have to discuss here in Jakarta, because the narrative should be made at the location where the dynamic has been most felt. We shouldn't be looking at the war here as an outsider. We are the agency here in Jakarta. And I think, for IBC to convene this meeting to speak about, all these most challenging geopolitical as well as geoeconomic challenges is something we need to do more. So I think, I hope this conversation is to be the first of many, and I really appreciate you all four of our distinguished speakers to bring in their expertise and insights to our stage and to share our insights to our audience. And also, thank you so much for everyone to staying until the end of this whole session, and I really would like to, have an engaging conversation following up after this stage as well. So thank you so much for everyone, and thank you so much for our distinguished speakers.
Thank you very much to our moderator and panelists, and may we request for you to please remain on stage. For next, we are to present a token of appreciation on behalf of the Indonesian Business Council. And to present the token, we'd like to invite onto the stage the chairman of PT Gunung Sewu Kencana, Bapak Husodo Angko Subroto, to please come up onto the stage to present the token of appreciation to our esteemed moderator and panelists. And next, may we invite for a group photo